The mighty Greek army stands at the walls of Troy, but instead of victorious attacks, it is gripped by a mysterious epidemic. Legends say that it was the wrath of the god Apollo, and only a sacrifice could lift the curse. Now we will delve into this mythical story to understand why the ancient Greeks believed that a bloody price was inevitable. Subscribe to the channel, like the video, and let's get started. The 10th year of the war. The air above the coast where the Achaean camp was located was heavy and stifling. It smelled not only of salt and scorched grass, but also of long-standing disappointment. Thousands of ships, once proudly pulled ashore, were now covered with shells, their tarred sides cracked under the merciless Anatolian sun. The camp had turned into a huge, disorderly city full of warriors who had already forgotten what their own homes looked like. Victory seemed as distant as the native shores of Hellas. In this atmosphere of stagnation and muffled discontent, any trophy, any booty, was valued at its weight in gold. During one of their raids on the surrounding cities, the Achaeans captured many prisoners. Among them was a girl named Chryseis. By right of the leader, she went to the supreme commander of the army, King Agamemnon of Mycena. For him, she was just another symbol of his status, a beautiful thing that confirmed his power. He did not care who her father was, but he should have. One morning, an old man appeared at Agamemnon's tent. He did not look like a warrior or a local beggar. His clothes were modest, but he held a golden staff wrapped in white woolen ribbons, a sacred attribute of a priest. It was Chryseis, a servant of the god Apollo, who had come to redeem his daughter. Behind him he carried untold treasures, a ransom capable of tempting any king. He spoke humbly, addressing all the Achaean leaders, wishing them victory and a speedy return home. He asked for only one thing, to give him his daughter in exchange for rich gifts and out of respect for the son of Zeus, silver-haired Apollo. The warriors, weary of war and the wrath of the gods, murmured their approval. Accepting the ransom and releasing the girl seemed reasonable. It was a gesture of goodwill that could win the favor of the powerful Olympian. But Agamemnon, whose pride was as great as his army, saw it as humiliation. How could he, the supreme king, yield to some priest? "Old man, I don't want to see you here anymore." His voice thundered with contempt. He rudely drove Chryseis away, threatening that neither his staff nor his priesthood would save him if he dared to appear again. He promised to take his daughter, Chryseis, to his distant Argos, where she would weave at the loom and share his bed. Insulted and humiliated, Chryseis silently withdrew. He walked along the shore of the noisy sea, his heart breaking with grief. Reaching a secluded spot, he raised his hands to the sky and prayed to his god, Apollo. He reminded him of all the sacrifices he had made, of all the temples he had built in his honor, and he asked for revenge. "Let the Danaans pay for my tears with your arrows," so went his prayer. And the god heard him. According to the Iliad, Apollo descended from the peaks of Olympus, angry like the night. Behind him, his quiver of arrows rattled, and the sound was like thunder. He sat far from the Greek ships, and the ringing of his silver bowstring was the first sound of a new invisible war. His arrows were no ordinary arrows. They carried pestilence, a deadly disease. The first to fall were the mules and swift dogs in the camp. Then the deadly arrows flew into the people. Funeral pyres flared up throughout the vast camp. They burned day and night, and black, thick smoke covered the sky, mixing with dust and the smell of death. For 9 days the god shot his arrows into the army. For 9 days the Achaeans died without understanding why. Mighty heroes who knew no fear in battle were powerless against an invisible enemy. Their armor could not protect them from the disease, and their swords could not strike its source. The camp, which had recently been full of life and war cries, was now filled with the moans of the dying. On the 10th day, when despair reached its peak, Achilles, the greatest of the Greek warriors, could no longer bear it. Inspired by the goddess Hera, who sympathized with the Achaeans, he called a public assembly. Something had to be done. Things could not go on like this. He addressed the warriors with a simple idea. It was necessary to ask a priest, a soothsayer, or at least an interpreter of dreams to find out why the gods were angry. Had they been angered by a broken vow or a careless sacrifice? And then one man stepped forward from among the leaders. His name was Calchas, son of Festor. He was considered the best bird diviner in the entire army. It was he, thanks to his gift, given to him by Apollo himself, who led the Achaean ships to the walls of Troy. He knew the past, the present, and the future. But now he was silent, and his face was full of fear. Imagine this scene. Thousands of warriors sit on the ground between the ships. In the center are the leaders, an angry and confused Agamemnon, an impatient Achilles, and a wise Nestor. The air is thick with the smell of burning wood from the funeral pyres, and into this oppressive silence must fall the voice of truth. Calchas knew this truth, but he also knew Agamemnon's fierce temper. To say that the supreme commander was to blame for all the troubles was a sure path to destruction. He rose, but before speaking, he turned to Achilles. "O swift-footed Achilles, you command me to reveal the reason for Apollo's wrath. I will speak, but you must swear that you will protect me with both words and force. For I fear to anger the one who rules all the Argives, and to whom the Achaeans obey." It was a clever move. Calchas publicly enlisted the support of the most powerful warrior, creating a counterweight to the king's authority. Achilles, without hesitation, took an oath, promising that no one, not even Agamemnon himself, would dare touch the seer. Only then did Calchas decide to speak. His voice, quiet at first, grew stronger with each word. He announced that the god was not angry because of a broken vow or a meager sacrifice. The reason was the insult inflicted on his priest. Agamemnon had humiliated Chrysis, refused to return his daughter, and did not accept the ransom. It is for this, Calchas concluded, that the far-seeing one has sent misfortune upon us and will continue to send it. He will not withdraw his destructive hand from the Danaans until we return his daughter to her father without any ransom, and send a sacred hecatomb, a sacrifice of 100 bulls, to his city of Chrysis. The words hung in the air. Now everything was clear. The cause of the plague was not divine caprice, but the specific actions of a specific person, the actions of their king. The eyes of thousands of warriors, full of fear and reproach, turned to Agamemnon. The funeral pyres continued to smolder on the horizon, but now something new was mixed in with their smoke, an icy tension ready to explode into open conflict at any moment. The silence that followed Calchas's words was heavier than the roar of the funeral pyres. It was dense, viscous, full of unspoken accusations. Every warrior, from the lowly slinger to the noble chieftain, felt the truth, sharp and cold as a sword blade, pressed against their leader's throat. Agamemnon stood in the center of this silent circle, and it seemed as if the very air was pressing down on his mighty shoulders. But he was a king not only by birth, but also by spirit, a spirit that was unyielding and proud to the point of recklessness. A crimson blush flooded his face from his neck to his temples. His eyes, which a moment ago had expressed only regal discontent, now flashed with lightning. He jumped to his feet so abruptly that his carved chair toppled over with a crash. The veins in his neck bulged, and his hand clenched into a fist as if searching for the hilt of a sword. His gaze, full of venom, was fixed not on Achilles, but on the trembling seer. "Prophet of misfortune," he cried, his voice breaking with rage. "You have never spoken a kind word to me. Your heart is pleased to predict only evil, and you have never fulfilled or predicted anything good. And now you proclaim before the Danaans that the far-shooter sends misfortune upon us only because I did not want to accept the ransom for Chryseis?" He paused, looking around at the leaders with a heavy gaze, as if seeking support, but meeting only downcast eyes. This enraged him even more. "Yes, I refused. I prefer her to my lawful wife Clytemnestra. She is her equal in beauty, intelligence, and skill in needlework. But even so, I agree to return her if it is necessary. I want to see the people saved, not destroyed." For a moment, it seemed that reason had prevailed. A sigh of relief swept through the ranks of the warriors. But it was only a ruse, a prelude to the real blow. Agamemnon straightened up, and his voice rang with metal. "But since I am deprived of it, prepare another reward for me immediately. For it is not fitting for me, the only one of the Argives, to remain without a gift. You all see that I am being deprived of my reward." This was unheard of. The gerus, an honorary gift, was not just booty. It was the visible embodiment of theme, a warrior's honor. It was awarded by the entire army for valor. To take it away or demand another, already distributed, meant to question the entire system of military honor on which the army was based. And then Achilles, who had been standing silently, stepped forward. His beauty was dangerous, like that of a predator before a leap. "O most glorious Atreide, most covetous of all men," he began, and his voice rang with icy mockery. "Where shall the great Achaeans find a reward for you? We do not know where the common treasures lie. Everything we have taken from the cities has already been divided. Do you really want the warriors to bring their share to the common pile again? That is unfair. Return the girl to the god, and we, the Achaeans, will repay you threefold and fourfold as soon as Zeus allows us to take the strong-walled Troy." But Agamemnon was no longer listening to reason. He saw before him not an ally, but a rival who dared to challenge him. "Do not try to deceive me, godlike Achilles," he roared. "You want to keep your reward, and I must sit empty-handed? No. If the Achaeans give me a gift equal in value to what I am losing, fine. And if they don't, I will come and take it myself. Yours, or Ajax's, or even Odysseus's. And whoever I come to will be angry." He deliberately named the greatest leaders, showing that his power extended to all. But the last threat was aimed directly at Achilles, and he accepted the challenge. The fury that had been dormant in him began to awaken. "You, clothed in shamelessness, with a fox's heart," cried Achilles, his voice drowning out the sound of the surf. "Which of the Achaeans will obey you after this? I did not come here for the Trojan spearmen. They have done me no harm. They have not stolen my horses and oxen. They have not ravaged my fields in fertile Phthia. Shady mountains and the noisy sea separate us. We came here for you, shameless man, to avenge Menelaus and your dishonored honor. And now you threaten to take away the reward that I earned with my sweat and blood, and which was given to me by the sons of the Achaeans?" He spoke louder and louder, and each word was like a lash of a whip. "My share of the spoils can never compare to yours, even though I bear the brunt of the war on my shoulders. When it comes time to divide the spoils, you get the biggest share. And I, tired of battle, return to the ships with a small but precious prize. So enough. I'm going to Phthia. Better to return home on my own ships than to stay here, humiliated, and accumulate treasures for you." The threat was terrible. The departure of Achilles and his Myrmidons would mean inevitable defeat. But Agamemnon was too blinded by anger to realize this. "Run away if you want," he said contemptuously. "I will not beg you to stay. There are others with me who will honor me, and foremost among them is Zeus, the provider. You are more hateful to me than all the kings raised by the gods. You are forever fond of strife, war, and battle. If you are strong, it is the God who has given you that strength. So go home with your ships and your men. But know this, since Phoebus Apollo is taking Chryseis away from me, I will send her away. But I will come to your tent and take your prize, the beautiful-eyed Briseis, so that you may understand how much more powerful I am than you, and so that others may fear to compare themselves to me in the future." That was the last straw. Achilles' heart was torn between two desires. One told him to draw his sharp sword from its sheath and kill the insolent man on the spot. The other told him to restrain his anger and calm his rage. While he hesitated, his hand already rested on the hilt of the sword and half pulled the blade out of its silver sheath. The warriors froze in horror, sensing the irreparable. The murder of the supreme commander would plunge the army into chaos and fratricidal war. And at that moment, something invisible to the others happened. Athena Pallas, sent by Hera, who loved both heroes and did not want either of them to die, descended rapidly from the heavens. She stood behind Achilles and grabbed him by his blonde hair. He turned around in amazement and immediately recognized the goddess by her sparkling, owl-like eyes. No one else saw her. "Why have you come, daughter of Zeus, holder of the Aegis?" he whispered. "To see the fury of Agamemnon? I will tell you what will happen. His pride will soon destroy his own soul." "I have come to temper your anger," replied the goddess. "Obey. Do not draw your sword, but you may strike him with words as you see fit. I promise you, the day will come when you will receive 3 times more gifts for this insult. Restrain yourself and obey us." The goddess's words had a cooling effect on him. With difficulty, he put his heavy sword back in its sheath. "The word of the gods must be honored," he said, still breathing heavily. "They listen favorably to those who obey them." But his rage found another outlet. He turned to Agamemnon, his eyes burning with cold fire. He grabbed the heavy royal scepter, studded with gold nails, a symbol of power and justice. "Drunkard, with the eyes of a dog and the heart of a deer," he roared. "You never dared to go into battle with your army or set an ambush with your best men. For you, that is tantamount to death. It is much easier to plunder the gifts of those who dare to contradict you. King, devourer of the people. But I swear by this scepter, which will never again be covered with leaves or sprout shoots since it left its trunk in the mountains. I swear by it that the day will come when the sons of the Achaeans will bitterly regret Achilles. When they perish in droves at the hands of the manslayer Hector, you will tear your hair out in impotent rage, regretting that you did not honor the best of the Achaeans. With these words, he threw his scepter forcefully to the ground. Then he sat down, his whole body shaking with restrained anger. Opposite him, Agamemnon raged. The assembly turned into an arena for two enraged titans. In this tense pause, when it seemed that the fragile alliance was about to crumble to dust, old Nestor, the eloquent orator from Pylos, rose. Words flowed from his lips like honey. He had already seen 2 generations of mortals, and now ruled over the third. He was living history, the embodiment of wisdom and experience. "O gods, what great sorrow comes upon the Achaean land," he began in his creaky but commanding voice. "How Priam and his sons will rejoice, how all the Trojans will rejoice when they learn of your quarrel. You are the best of the Danaans, both in council and in battle. Listen to me, you are both younger than me. In times past, I associated with men who were far more powerful than you, men like Pirithoeus and Dryas, shepherd of nations. And they listened to my advice, so listen to me too." He turned to Agamemnon. "Atreus, however powerful you may be, do not take the girl away from him. Leave him the gift awarded by the army. It is his honor." Then he turned to Achilles. "And you, Peleus, stop arguing with the king. Never has a scepter-bearer, to whom Zeus has given glory, been equal in honor to an ordinary warrior. You are powerful, and your mother is a goddess. But he is higher in power, for he rules over many." His words were full of wisdom and common sense. He tried to remind them of hierarchy, duty, and the greater goal. But the wounds were too deep and pride too strong. Agamemnon, though he listened to him with respect, remained adamant. Achilles, having fulfilled the will of the goddess, had already made his decision. The meeting was adjourned. It did not bring peace, but only deepened the division. The warriors dispersed to their tents and ships in oppressive silence. They had received the answer to their question. The cause of the mutiny was the pride of their king. And now they saw how that same pride had given rise to a new, even more terrible threat, the wrath of the greatest of their heroes. Agamemnon immediately set about carrying out his threats. He equipped a fast ship, placing the cunning Odysseus at its helm. The beautiful Chryses and 100 bulls for the sacred hecatomb came aboard. The ship set sail, carrying away the cause of divine wrath. But as soon as it disappeared over the horizon, the king called his 2 faithful heralds, Talthybius and Eurybates. "Go to the tent of Achilles Pelides," he ordered them with cold cruelty. "Take the beautiful armed Briseis by the hand and bring her to me. If he does not give her up, I will come myself with a multitude of warriors and take her by force, and that will be even worse for him." The heralds set off to carry out the order with heavy hearts. They walked along the seashore, and every step was torture for them. They had to carry out the king's will, but at the same time inflict a terrible insult on the hero they revered and feared. Thus one problem was solved, but another, far more terrible one arose. The sacrifice of one man's pride, the return of the captive, was supposed to appease the god and end the plague. But it also forced the sacrifice of another man's honor. And this new sacrifice, made not to a god, but to human pride, threatened to destroy the entire Achaean army more surely than any of Apollo's arrows. The curse was lifted, but it was replaced by anger that would determine the fate of the entire Trojan War. The heralds, Talthybius and Eurybates, walked along the shore, each step weighing heavily on their hearts. Their craft was to carry messages, to be the voice of kings, and they usually performed it with pride. Their staffs gave them immunity even on the battlefield. But now that staff seemed to them not a protection, but a mark of shame. They were not messengers of war or peace, but messengers of dishonor. They were going to take from the hero what was dearer to him than life itself, his honor, embodied in a beautiful captive. They did not dare to look at each other. Their eyes were fixed on the sand, which seemed to whisper words of condemnation after them. The Myrmidons' camp was strikingly different from the rest of the Achaean camp. There was none of the slackness and idle noise that reigned in the tents of the other leaders. The warriors silently cleaned their weapons and checked their harnesses, their faces stern and focused. They were not just an army, but a brotherhood forged in the fire of countless battles under the leadership of their demigod. When the heralds entered their territory, the conversations fell silent. Dozens of pairs of eyes, cold and sharp as spearheads, followed them to Achilles' tent. An icy silence hung in the air. They found him not in his tent, but outside, sitting on a simple hewn log. Next to him, leaning on his spear, stood his faithful friend and brother-in-arms, Patroclus. Achilles was not throwing thunder and lightning. He held a richly decorated lyre, a trophy from the plundered Thebes, and quietly strummed the strings, soothing his soul with songs about the exploits of ancient heroes. His gaze was fixed on the wine-dark sea, and he seemed not to notice anyone around him. But when the heralds, intimidated, stopped a few steps away, he raised his head. His eyes, the color of the spring sky, were calm, but a storm lurked in their depths. The heralds were silent, not daring to utter a word. They just stood with their heads bowed, like convicts. And then Achilles, understanding everything without words, put down his lyre. His voice was even, devoid of anger, but that made it sound even more frightening. "Rejoice, heralds, messengers of Zeus and mortals, come closer. You are not guilty before me, and my wrath is not directed at you. King Atreus is guilty, for he sent you after Briseis." He turned to Patroclus, and his face was contorted with pain for a moment. "Patroclus, my friend, bring the girl out and give her to them. Let them take her away. And let them themselves be witnesses before the blessed gods and mortal men, and before this cruel-hearted king, if ever my strength is needed again to avert shameful destruction from the rest. He is mad with his own destructive pride, and cannot see the past or the future, cannot think of how to save the Achaeans in the battle by the ships." Patroclus gritted his teeth and entered the tent. A moment later, he came out, leading Briseis by the hand. She walked reluctantly, her cheeks pale and her eyes full of tears. She did not look at the heralds, her gaze fixed on Achilles' face, as if seeking salvation, or at least an answer in it. But the hero did not look at her. He turned back to the sea, his profile as firm as a statue of Parian marble. The girl turned around one last time as she passed him, and a quiet sob escaped her lips. Talthybius and Eurybates gently took her by the arms and led her away. The Myrmidons parted before them, their eyes burning with fierce hatred, but not for the heralds or the girl, but for the distant tent to which she was being led, the tent of Agamemnon. As soon as they disappeared from view, Achilles rose. The wall of icy self-control that he had erected around himself collapsed. He moved away from his warriors and went down to the very edge of the surf, where the waves hissed as they crashed onto the pebbles. And there, far from everyone, he gave free rein to his grief. He sat down on the sand, wrapped his arms around his knees, and wept. It was not a quiet cry, but the loud, desperate sobs of a warrior who had lost everything. He cried, stretching out his arms to the sea, and called for his mother. His mother, silver-footed Thetis, heard him. She sat in the depth of the sea, next to her old father Nereus. Her son's cry pierced the thickness of the water and reached her ears. Like the morning mist, she rose from the gray depths, surfaced, and sat on the shore next to her crying son. She gently stroked his head, and her touch was cool as seawater. "My child, why are you crying? What sorrow has entered your heart? Do not hide it. Tell me, so that we both may know." And Achilles, choking with sobs, told her everything. About Apollo's wrath, about Calchas's words, about Agamemnon's fury, and about his oath. He told her how the king had taken Briseis, his honorary gift, his Garrus, thereby reducing his theme to dust. "Mother," he concluded, his voice ringing with not only pain, but also a thirst for revenge. "If you gave birth to me for such a short life, then at least the Olympian, the thunderer Zeus, should have granted me honor. But he did not honor me in the least. Lord Agamemnon, son of Atreus, dishonored me. He took my gift by force. So go to Olympus if you can, beg Zeus. Remind him how you alone, of all the immortals, saved him from shameful bonds, when Hera, Poseidon, and Athena Pallas conspired to shackle him. You called on the 100-handed Briareus, who is more powerful than his own father. He sat down next to Cronus, proud of his strength, and the gods retreated in fear. Remind him of this, embrace his knees, and beg him to grant victory to the Trojans. Let them drive the Achaeans back to their ships. Let them perish, so that all may enjoy their king. And let Agamemnon himself, the ruler of all, understand how foolish he was not to honor the best of the Achaeans." Thytia listened to him, and tears salty as the sea from which she came rolled down her immortal cheeks. "Oh, my child, woe is me! Why did I nurse you, born to an evil fate? Your life is so short, so let it pass without tears and sorrow. Now you are both short-lived and the unhappiest of all. I will go to snow-capped Olympus and tell everything to Zeus, the thunderer. Perhaps he will listen to me. But you stay by your ships, be angry with the Achaeans, and do not enter the battle. Wait, I will return." Having said this, she plunged back into the depths of the sea, leaving her son alone with his grief and anger. Achilles remained on the shore, his heart black with resentment. He looked at the ships, at the bustle of the camp, at the distant walls of Troy, and a terrible decision grew in his soul. He would no longer fight for them. He would sit and watch as they were killed. He would wait until they crawled to him on their knees, begging for forgiveness. And then, perhaps, he would forgive them. Or perhaps not. Meanwhile, Odysseus's ship reached the city of Chryse. They entered a deep harbor, lowered the sail, took down the mast, and moored to the shore. The warriors disembarked, led out the oxen for the hecatomb, and finally brought out Chryseis herself. The cunning Odysseus led her to the altar and handed her over to her father. "O Chryseis," he said, "Agamemnon, lord of men, has sent me to return your daughter to you, and to bring a sacred sacrifice to Phoebus on behalf of the Danaans, so that we may appease the god who has sent us many sorrows." The old priest joyfully accepted his daughter. He embraced her, and tears of joy flowed down his wrinkled cheeks. Then the warriors quickly arranged the bulls around the magnificent altar, washed their hands, and took barley grains for the ceremony. Chryseis, raising his hands to the sky, prayed aloud. "Hear me, silver-eyed god, protector of Chryseis. You heard me before when I prayed for revenge, and you honored me by sending great disaster upon the Achaeans. So now fulfill my prayer. Turn away the shameful death from the Danaans." And this time Apollo heard him. After the prayer and sacrifice, when the fattest parts of the bulls were burned on the altar and the rest of the meat was roasted on spits, the feast began. All day long they delighted the god with beautiful paeans, singing of his power. And Apollo, listening to them, rejoiced in his heart. When the sun set and darkness fell, they fell asleep at the moorings of their ship. With the first rays of dawn, they set out to sea again. Apollo sent them a favorable wind, and the sail billowed like the belly of a huge beast. The ship flew swiftly across the waves, cutting through the purple water, and soon they returned to the Achaean camp. The plague had ceased. The gods' arrows no longer brought death. The curse had been lifted. But the camp did not breathe a sigh of relief. Instead of fear of divine punishment, another, colder and more clinging fear took hold. Fear of Hector, fear of the Trojans. Because everyone knew that without Achilles their inevitable doom awaited them. And now that the god had been appeased, the greatest of their heroes sat in his tent, deaf to their pleas, blind to the suffering of his comrades, and his wrath was more terrible than any curse. For a simple warrior whose life hung by a thread, first from divine illness and now from the enemy's sword, this dispute between the leaders was something distant and monstrous. They did not discuss the subtleties of honor. They saw only that their king, for the sake of possessing a single slave girl, had endangered thousands of lives, and that their greatest defender, for the sake of his wounded pride, had doomed them to destruction. In tents and around dying fires, people whispered that Apollo's curse had not gone away. It had simply changed form, moving from the god's arrows to Achilles' heart. Wise leaders such as Odysseus and Diomedes faced an insoluble dilemma. They understood that Agamemnon, by saving their bodies from the plague, had condemned their souls to the fear of defeat. To intervene would mean challenging the supreme authority and provoking a split. To remain silent would mean meekly going to their deaths without their trump card. The cunning Odysseus, standing aside during the quarrel, remained silent, but his razor-sharp mind was already calculating the moves in this deadly game. He saw that Agamemnon, in trying to assert his authority, was in fact losing it, becoming a hostage to his own pride. The giant Ajax, Telamon, Achilles' cousin, only clenched his melon-sized fists grimly, unable to find words that could pierce the armor of royal stubbornness and heroic anger. It is important to understand that Briseis was not just a woman or military spoils. In Homer's heroic world, the Gedas, an honorary gift, was the visible embodiment of theme, the honor and status of a warrior. It was awarded by the entire army in recognition of merit. To take away the Gedas meant to publicly declare, "Your deeds are worthless, your place in our hierarchy is nothing." For Achilles, who knew of his short but glorious fate, this was tantamount to spiritual murder. Agamemnon did not simply take his captive away from him. He erased him from the pantheon of heroes, turning him into a humiliated extra. For Briseis herself, this transition was a fall from one abyss into another, even darker one. Ancient sources, in particular the lost poem Cypria, hint that Achilles and Patroclus treated her with sympathy, comforting her after they themselves killed her husband and brothers during the capture of Lyrnessus. Now she was being passed around like an object to the tent of a man whose lust and pride had caused the deaths of thousands. She walked through the camp feeling not only the sympathetic but also the lustful glances of the warriors, realizing that from a symbol of honor for one hero, she had become a cause of shame for the entire army. The true sacrifice in this story was made not on the altar of Apollo, but on the altar of human pride, and the name of this sacrifice was not Iphigenia or Chryseis, but the unity of the Achaean army. Apollo's curse in the Trojan cycle is not just a fairy tale, but a profound myth showing how the ancient Greeks understood their dependence on divine will. The sacrifice, whether it was the return of Chryseis or the death of Iphigenia, symbolized the price that had to be paid for victory. This story reminds us of the eternal questions of faith, duty, and the price of success, remaining relevant today.